Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't know what's going on, where have you been? Because it's obviously all over the news. We had Battle of Ideas North on Saturday, which is a great event. This conference up in Manchester, which we were involved in organising. And something I found really funny is that when we discussed the sessions, the first one was on sovereignty. And originally we'd just talked about it in relation to the fact that the Brexit referendum vote was 10 years ago. And then the stuff happened with Venezuela. And we added Venezuela. So it was Venezuela and Brexit Britain. Does sovereignty still matter? And then whilst we were in the midst of organising, the stuff happened with Greenland, where Trump was saying that he's going to take Greenland. So we added Greenland, Venezuela, Greenland, and Brexit Britain. And then just at the last minute, with all the Iran stuff kicking off, we added in Iran. And I thought that just shows the state of the world at the moment, the fact that things are so fast changing that we're constantly having to adapt. And a podcast like this, if I'm slow on editing, it will be completely redundant because Trump will have invaded a different country next week.
Don't say that.
Well, yeah. So Iran, essentially on the 28th of February, which was 2 weeks ago, really, there was some coordinated strikes from the US and Israel, which wiped out a few key targets, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
I'm so glad you're going to do all these complicated pronunciations today.
Well, I should be okay. My pronunciation is not great, but I was learning Farsi for a while, so I should be better than I am. But there we go.
You're better than me.
Yeah. So these strikes have been going on since then. Iran has retaliated, and we're now caught in the midst of what could be a drawn-out conflict. Trump has said that they're not finished yet, but that he needs to. They need to sort of wrap it up quickly.
It's mostly complete, I thought he said, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Trump, every interview, he sort of says something that makes me think he's contradicting himself, but that's sort of in Trump's communication style. Interestingly, Trump has the ability as part of the... there was an act passed in, I think, 73 or something in Congress, which allows him to engage in a conflict like this for, I believe it's 60 days. And then that can be extended after that 60 days for another 30 days. So he has potentially 3 months.
That means without going to any other...
Without going to Congress. Because Congress would then have to pass a motion voting for war with a certain country. So yeah, we're now in a position where oil prices have been affected. Oil briefly went over $100 a barrel. Now, a bit about the geography of Iran, because I think this is relevant. So Iran is different. I think a lot of people in the West sort of confuse Iran with other Middle East states. Iran is not an Arab state. So they have a very, very small Arabic population, but majority of Iranians speak Farsi or Persian.
I was going to say, they like the term Persian, don't
Yes,
they?
What was interesting is when I started learning the language, one of the things I was surprised about was that the teacher would call it Persian. I said, that's interesting. So the state historically was known as Persia until the 1930s, when the first Shah made an attempt to include the different or represent the different ethnic populations of Iran, because only about 50 to 60% are Persian. The rest are minority groups. So the largest minority group is Azeris, and the second largest is Kurds. Mm-hmm. And we know from other conflicts, we talked about Syria quite a lot when that was kicking off, that the Kurdish population are mostly concentrated in that area in sort of north-western Iran, bordering Iraq, and then over to Syria, Turkey. That's where the Kurdish population exists.
We might need to add a little map in at that stage for those
don't
people.
Don't say that, it's going to be more editing.
Who are not following this exactly.
So Iran is absolutely massive as a country. Yeah. It's bigger than the UK, Germany and France combined. It's got these massive mountain ranges. So the Zagros Mountains in the west. You've got I think it's the Markan Mountains in the south, sort of southeast, and then the Elburz in the north. So it's bordered by these huge mountain ranges. In the middle of the country, you've got these massive deserts. One of these deserts is bigger than the Netherlands and Belgium.
Wow.
So you get a bit of an idea about the size of this country. And it's incredibly well defended because of its geography. Now, the key to Iran, or understanding the geopolitical ramifications, is the Strait of Hormuz, which has been in the news a lot recently. So about a fifth of the world's oil supplies goes through the Strait of Hormuz, because that is a key route for Kuwait, for Saudi Arabia, and for Iranian oil. Now, when there's a conflict and Iran sort of holds the key to the Strait of Hormuz, because it's only 35 kilometers across, they can just close the strait. So what we're seeing now is oil is not getting through, which of course, when you restrict the demand, suddenly the price of oil is going up. I think people will have noticed the petrol stations, the prices are going up. This has had an interesting, and maybe we can get onto this, but an interesting development in terms of our energy policy in the UK. And I think people would expect people that are perhaps in our camp, where we talk about energy abundance and making the most of our own oil and gas reserves, we might expect this to be a chink in the armor of the sort of the net zero, fundamentalists, if you can call them that, like Ed Miliband. Interestingly, it's sort of made them double down, and fine, they might be looking at us and saying the exact same thing, right? So it's had all of these different ramifications, and Iran is very interesting in that respect because it holds a lot of weight geopolitically. Anyway, thoughts?
Just as an aside, as well as the actual kind of physical control of the Straits of Hormuz, there is the issue around getting insurance cover for any cargo going through it. My understanding is that it's now almost impossible to get insurance cover. And the cost has risen so high that the cost of the insurance is greater than the money that you would make on taking cargo through. Mm-hmm. So therefore, nobody would want to bother. And so I think it's easy to think about the closure and the inability of cargo to transit that area as being all about the war and maybe mines and those kind of physical things, but there are kind of financial issues there as well. Yeah, and I think it's not just oil; it's things like fertilizer that come through there as well. And obviously, just where we are, spring has sprung in the UK, and I'll be planting my tomato seeds this weekend. But for proper farming businesses, threats to our supply of fertilizer will be a big issue as well as oil.
A few tankers have got through, particularly Iranian ones and all of that oil is going to China, which is interesting. What they have to do is they have to go dark, so turn off any sort of tracking software. I don't know how it works, right? So they can't be tracked. And but Iran has said that they will hit any tanker trying to go through. Interestingly, Trump said, I think in the last couple of days, I can't remember his exact words, and I've just lost the article now, but he said something like, you've just got to be brave and go for it. He's saying to these oil tankers, he said, we've taken out their ability to strike you, so just go for it. Yeah. I think you've got to be brave.
I think the American government are also looking to provide alternative insurance cover.
Right, okay.
Which, I think you'll be very brave to do that without insurance cover. Maybe this is just my actuarial background that makes me worry about these things. But that's something that the UK government hasn't thought to provide, interestingly.
So a little bit about the UK then and how it's affected by this. In Iran's retaliatory strikes, they hit RAF Akrotiri, which is on the island of Cyprus, where we still have 2 bases there. There was a bit of criticism as to why the UK hasn't been defending that. Now, they have sent a ship, the HMS Dragon, I believe, is on its way. And they've said that they've a process which would normally take 6 weeks of getting that ready, as they've done in 6 days. I think one question could be, why wasn't it ready anyway?
Yeah.
With something like this, surely they would have known about, they would have had intel about these strikes. I can't imagine they wouldn't have done. And I think it's brought to the forefront the shockingly small size of our Navy, and how a lot of people don't realise that even though we were once the naval superpower in the world and envied all over the world for our Navy, it's now very, very small, and we struggle to even defend places like, our own bases in Cyprus.
Yeah, I've said my piece before, haven't I, that I think we should wind down the army and just really build up our navy.
Right, okay, yeah.
I'm sure wouldn't be popular with our
right.
friends
We've
of the
just
forces.
lost all of the army voters. So what do we do then as a response, the UK? So the political response has been interesting. Farage initially came out and said we should support the US strikes. Reform seemed to be a little bit contradictory in what they're saying. Robert Jenrick was saying we should stay out of it. Interestingly, since the last episode we did, which was a while back, we've had the formation of a new political party, Restore Britain. And Rupert Lowe has been quite adamant that we shouldn't be focusing on bombing other countries, and we should be focusing on Britain and our problems here. So there's a bit of a split on the right. There's been this question of whether we should, if we're not getting involved, whether we should let the US use our bases. Because we still have a lot of valuable bases in strategic locations, which Trump would very much want to use. Interestingly, he said in a bit of a, I was going to say a bit of a criticism, a complete criticism of Starmer. He said he's no Winston Churchill. And he said if the UK decide to get involved now, we don't need them. There's no point coming in right at the end when the war is already won.
We're not going to have Starmer on our banknotes then.
No, probably not. I wonder what the population would choose, Starmer or a beaver. We could poll the public, couldn't we?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What should the UK do?
I'm very much a non-interventionist in these kind of situations. So not only because the history of Western intervention in any of these disputed areas is just a very, very poor experience. We've never managed to go in and make things better. It's almost, there's almost nothing that can make things worse than Western intervention. So that's kind of where I would start. I think some of the more balanced questions. So, should we allow America to use bases? Should we support other people intervening? I think a kind of a little bit more balanced. And I think I would want to have a really clear understanding of what's in it for us. Why would we benefit from that? And that does seem to be the thing that is missing from a lot of the discussion. How do we decide what's in our best interests? Nobody's asking us, are they? And that seems to be a debate that we've forgotten how to have.
Yeah.
I think so many years being in the EU, I think we kind of just behave like a member state and not a nation state. And we have to rediscover how to think about what is in our best interests.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people look at what's going on in Iran, or what has been going on for a long time, which is an unbelievably oppressive regime that have killed thousands upon thousands of its own citizens. You saw the Mahsa Amini protests. Of course, I think we discussed them on this.
Yeah.
Where she was protesting without her hijab, because it's illegal to not wear a hijab as a woman in Iran, and she was killed by police, and lots of people came out in protest. Then the regime cracked down. This regime goes back to 1979 when they had the Islamic Revolution, and I think a lot of people look at that and say, this awful regime that's been in place since 79, this is a chance to get rid of it. And I think that supposes that it's up to us to get rid of. and that we can just kind of look around the world and go, oh, we don't like that regime there, we're going to get rid of that, and we want this, over here. And I think I might have been liable to that sort of thinking because, I mean, we all want to see liberal democracy all over the world. We believe it's the best system. Doesn't seem like it sometimes, but I think that what the 2000s told us and the 2010s is that is wishful thinking. It's a fantasy. And who are we to decide what's best for these countries? Who are we to say we're just going to replace this regime with another one? And even if we could, and even if we thought that was the best thing to do, you then see in places like Afghanistan, in Iraq, the inability of let's say the conquering power, in this case US and the coalition, but the UK, to provide stability and consistency. In many ways the war in Afghanistan was a success initially, but the problem was, what do you do then? And we saw over 20 years an inability to provide or to help foster any sort of democratic process where there was a healthy democracy.
And especially that's the case if you're only intervening from the air, so you haven't got anybody there, kind of boots on the ground, as they say. I think the idea that you can... I mean, I wish the Iranian people every success in overthrowing that vile regime. That's absolutely what I want. But the idea that, the US comes in and through aerial strikes makes it so that happens, I think that's rather aspirational, really. I would love them to succeed, but it's hard to see that that's going to happen. And I think the more likely outcome is that there will be a period of real instability in the region, which probably won't help the Iranian people either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's easy for us to get caught up in the Trump stuff. I mean, when the Maduro thing happened, and I think it's a really interesting, I've been wondering to myself the last couple of days why I had a different response to the Maduro thing. And there's a couple of reasons. I said this to you yesterday or 2 days ago, that I was a little bit less vehement in my opposition to the kidnapping of Maduro, because that was much clearer that it was in the interests of America, right? So they had a clearer idea of what they were trying to do there. And it seems to me, and I don't know if this is public information or not, but it seems to me that they had correspondence with the deputy in Venezuela so that there would be a new regime that would be more aligned to American interests. Now, that's not America saying, oh, we just want to go and impose democracy in other countries. That's them saying, well, we've got this regime that's hostile to us, and it will be in our interest to put in a regime that's more favourable, and to do so with minimal casualties and a very, very well-targeted operation. Now, doesn't mean I'm necessarily saying it was the right thing to do. I'm just saying that it's much more defendable. Defensible?
Defensible, I think. Yeah.
Now, putting that aside for a second, Iran is a very different prospect, partly because of the makeup and the history of its political process. Venezuela has had elections that are much more democratic in the past, and I think we've seen a suppression of that. But it's a very, very different country, very different setup. It's not a theocracy for a start. Iran, I think people are taking what's happened in Venezuela, which Donald Trump claimed was part of the Monroe Doctrine, or the Donroe Doctrine, which suggests that the US should be able to have influence in the Western Hemisphere. And now he's going into the other side of the world. And I think a lot of people watching, and it can be tempting to do this, look and say, oh, wow, they've had a bit of success there. They can do it in other countries now. Completely different thing. And it's easy for us to then suddenly get drawn into something, especially if we just do what America tells us to, which at the moment we're not. And I commend Starmer for that. A lot of people are sort of ready to criticise him, but I think at least, take the positives when you can. And it would be easy for us to get drawn into a long, protracted conflict when we then start having to send in troops as a way of backing up the efforts that we've made there, and suddenly you're then drawn into something that we saw with Iraq, and I know that it's a different situation, but I think we have to learn our lessons from the past, and I think that a lot of the public are strongly non-interventionist for good reason, but the political class maybe less so, and I think we need to re-establish that that sense of we're not just going to try and intervene in other countries and impose what we want.
I think as soon as you start going to war, everything becomes really unpredictable. There's so many things that can change around you, and so imagining that even with the kind of weaponry and the AI and everything else that we've got today, the idea that you can really control what's going on in a war situation, I think is just madness. But just to go back to what you said, because it almost sounded like what you said was
Support for
if you can if you can intervene cleanly and quickly, that's okay. But if you can only intervene in a very dirty, horrible way, then that's not okay. I don't think you were saying that, but it sounded like
what I'm saying is that in order to defend a position like what they're doing in Iran or what they did in Venezuela, one of the criterion is what are your goals, and how do you measure when you have achieved those goals?
Yeah.
And in Venezuela, that was a lot more obvious. I know that he was dilly-dallying about whether it was about the drugs issue or whether it was about oil, but it was a lot clearer. Now, I don't know if we've seen the end of the Venezuela stuff, but it does seem like they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, and they weren't going to be drawn into a protracted conflict. Now, I'm not American, and I think what we have a tendency to do is to judge America like we judge the UK. I judge the UK because I'm a citizen that can vote in the elections here, and I care about the UK. So I'm only judging America from like a third-party perspective, as an analysis more than as a voter or a commentator in America, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
If the UK had gone and done that, I might be saying something very different.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So are we agreeing that non-intervention is the right approach for Britain here?
Yeah. Definitely.
Even though we do think that it would be great if that regime in Iran could be overthrown.
Yeah, and non-intervention, not as a default position because you haven't made up your mind, but non-intervention because it's stated and you say this is in the best interest of the UK to not join America in this war and to focus on what we care about.